Can we like take a deep breath and meditate for 2 seconds? Like, just and we're back. No, I'm joking.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Helmany Podcast. I'm Casey Rodomore, joined as always by Aaron Redwig, my co-host. And today we have a returning, very special guest, friend of the podcast, Matthew.
Quantum computing guy.
Matthew, quantum computing expert.
Matthew, physics bachelor degree.
Yeah, disclaimer, I am not a quantum computing expert. I studied physics in college.
And that's the best we can do here.
That's the best we can do. You know what? We're not getting fucking Hawking on here.
You guys asked us for experts, and this is what we can provide.
I'm here to help.
So yeah, we're here to talk about quantum computers.
I heard that you guys are in crisis.
Who's in crisis?
Bitcoin.
Not really.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody's really paying attention, right? Do you think we're crisis?
Oh,
Like,
I mean, look at. Also, hold the mic closer to. Yeah. No, we are kind of in crisis. I mean,
we?
Bitcoin is at like 90K.
yeah, but it's not about like quantum computers.
Yeah,
It's
but
like-
everyone who cares about quantum thinks it's about quantum, and then everyone who cares about AI thinks
Right.
it's about AI, and then
True.
everyone who cares about knots or like.
No, you're right. We
spam
are
things about,
in crisis. We're actually in a superposition of different crises.
Yes,
Right.
that's
Yes,
exactly right,
thank
Casey.
you.
And
Thank you.
scene, and
Yep.
that's the episode.
And so one of them is, quantum FUD. Nick Carter, who I like a lot, posted a couple blog posts about quantum computers and the state of quantum, the quantum industry and all that, and how it relates to Bitcoin. And specifically, it relates to Bitcoin because Bitcoin uses elliptic curve cryptography pervasively. And one of the assumptions of elliptic curve cryptography, the thing that makes it useful, is you can take a private key and you can turn it into something called the public key. And then with the private key, you can create something called a signature. And then with the public key and the signature, you can verify that only the person who had the private key corresponding to the public key could have made the signature.
It's a zero knowledge proof of having the private key.
Yes.
This is the don't trust verify.
This is when we say don't
Bitcoin.
trust verify, it's that and hash functions and code and all sorts of other stuff.
But it's like it's a technical solution to the trust problem of like double spend and institute. Like you have to like listen
very,
to
very much so, because in the absence of public key cryptography, which is it's called public key cryptography or asymmetric cryptography. You're left with the reason it's called asymmetric cryptography is because there's this asymmetry between the private key and the public key. They're not the same kind of thing.
As opposed to a symmetric cryptography where it's like a password that you share.
Exactly, a single password. So it is actually kind of very much true that if you only have symmetric cryptography, well, then what you have is you have like a trusted intermediary that you send your password to, that they go, okay, this person knew the password, and then acts on their behalf. Right.
There's this like physical web of trust layer or something. I don't even know.
But you have to trust that intermediary because you're sending them your password, right? Whereas sending somebody your public key doesn't mean that you trust them at all, because all they can do is verify signatures that you've made. They can't create new signatures. They can't get your private key. So anyways, these public keys and private keys are very important, very critical to this whole thing. This whole Bitcoin thing.
And so when someone drops a blog post saying, guys, quantum's on the way, maybe before the next presidential election,
that's right.
Bitcoin people
freak out.
Because quantum computers, if such a thing exists, can run something...
Big if true.
Big if true.
Big if true. They can run something called Shor's algorithm. SHOR.
SHOR, yeah.
That's why we have the big brain.
I'm here to
This is why you didn't win bananagrams at all.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we should say yesterday was Thanksgiving. Today
Happy
is Black Friday.
Thanksgiving,
We
everybody.
spent Thanksgiving together, and Casey and Matt talked about quantum for probably 6 hours.
Yeah, so we really blew our wad as far as this podcast is concerned. Like, we got nothing left. We're just recycling things we talked about.
But that's fine because
yesterday.
I didn't participate. I was cooking. I did not.
You were cooking.
I was cooking
in the kitchen.
I was in the kitchen having conversations about like gossip and like personal intrigue and like celebrities.
Right.
And you guys were in the other room. It's the same room because I live in not that big of an apartment. Talking about quantum. Bay Area life.
Yep.
But yeah, I think it's good. Like you guys sort of blew your loads with each other in the
on each other,
yeah. And then I am now coming in with like just sort of a vague vibes level understanding of what's going on.
Yep.
So I think with those perspectives combined, we'll be able to get into stuff, but also keep it
right.
digestible.
So then, as I was saying, quantum computers can run this thing called Shor's algorithm.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which what it can do is it can take a public key, which you can think of in the context an elliptic curve system, cryptography system public key is a elliptic curve point, which is like some point on the elliptic curve that everybody agrees on, multiplied by a 256-bit secret private key, which is just a number that produces another elliptic curve point on the elliptic curve. And you can't break that down. You can't factor it back into,
or to do the discrete logarithm as the cryptographers say.
You can't break it. You can't factor it. You can't do the discrete logarithm of turning it back into the original curve point and secret number that it was multiplied with. We rely on this being hard, and quantum computers can run Shor's algorithm, so which can do this factoring
faster than a classical computer ever possibly could.
And a classical computer,
believe it to be hard for a.
That's right.
There's the hardness of the discrete log problem.
Well, I think we can make that pretty concrete, which is that in order to break an elliptic curve, which is like 256 bits, you have to do, you just have to guess.
I want to say that there's some better algorithms that give you like, it's like O square root of n.
Oh,
like,
okay.
so roughly it's like 2 to the 128.
Sure.
There's like, it involves like greatest common denominator, like whatever. There's like some magic stuff you can do to do better than just guessing and checking. But square root is not that great.
Yeah.
Like
still...
you're turning it from a 256-bit search space to a 128.
Are you sure you're not 128 is when you're just looking for collisions? Keep it close.
No, I think it's like there's a way to factor,
Okay.
to do the factoring thing such that it's square root of n.
Is this just relevant to breaking someone's private key,
I
like
might be
getting
wrong about
access
that.
to their Bitcoin or like signing transactions? Or is this also relevant to like finding a block?
So quantum computers can run another algorithm.
That's a
different
different
algorithm.
thing.
Which
So
is
the
called- which
Shor's
is called-
algorithm
well, let
stuff
me-
is just for being able to sign for someone's Bitcoin.
It's being able to create it's actually, yeah, it's being able to find a public key a private key that corresponds to a public key and thus be able to create a signature.
Yeah.
And
So
there's
like
another,
you could hack Satoshi's coins and you can move them.
yes.
But-
Well, wait, let's slow down.
Slow down.
So there's another algorithm which is called Grover's algorithm, which can be used to make finding a particular hash output more efficient. And so this could be used
than a classical computer.
So this could be used to find valid blocks faster than the old algorithm, except it's like not that much of a speed up.
It's also not parallelizable in the way that mining is. Like you can distribute mining in using the standard classical algorithm.
Meaning
really
you can have
easily.
a bunch of different mining machines that are all trying to find blocks simultaneously.
Correct. And that it's not really that easy to parallel, or like it's way better to run like a bigger centralized Grover search thing for mining specifically.
Right.
But are
so,
those the two sort of like
wait, let me just but the speed up for Grover's algorithm is not that high.
Also
it probably
square root
involves
of n.
massive constant factors.
Yeah.
And so it's basically of no concern for breaking hash functions. We think hash functions are safe.
So that one's not so concerning. It's more the private key aspect.
Shor's-
And are those the only two sort of like quantum
Relevant
questions
to
that are
Bitcoin?
relevant to Bitcoin?
Basically. I mean, not.
I think so. Yeah.
There's maybe some other ones, but that's basically
Those are
it.
like the two
Yeah.
important ones.
It's
the
actually
two important
shocking
ones.
how
And that's basically the only uses of quantum computers, like, at all. Like,
they're
I mean,
pretty shockingly useless. Like quantum computers, sometimes people think of quantum computers as like, oh, you have some, instead of having to ask all these separate questions, you can just ask some like superposition of questions and get some superposition of answers. And that's like not how it works. It's like there's this thing called a quantum computer, and then computer scientists try very hard to make it useful because their funding is like dependent on it, and they find like, oh, look at this like very convoluted thing that like maybe we can use it for. So they're like, it's like shocking how useless quantum computers actually are.
Well, it kind of makes sense to me that it would be relevant for cryptography. I don't know, like just in a total vibes level, like those two things seem like, they would be relevant.
Well, I think one interesting thing about cryptography, and maybe one of the things that makes quantum computers kind of relevant for it, is like we don't have proofs of hardness for cryptography. We just sort of, it's like these constructs, we believe they're hard to reverse, you know?
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's a religious belief that the discrete log problem is hard.
Yeah.
Like someone could come up with an algorithm tomorrow that like completely knocks out, you know, asymmetric cryptography as we know it today.
Yeah.
But like no one's found it yet.
That
And
seems
people
like
have tried
basically the
really hard.
sum of the whole situation. Is like tomorrow someone could come up with something that really changes everything,
Mhm.
Yeah.
but it hasn't happened today.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So then why? Okay, so let's maybe get back to the current affairs and why people are talking about this. Why are people like Scott Aaronson, Nick Carter, whoever, particularly concerned this week as opposed to 2 months ago?
Well, for that, let's defer to our quantum
To our
expert,
expert guest.
Matthew Wraith.
Not a quantum expert. I'm
Matthew
also
Wraith personally warranties your
But-
Bitcoin against seizure by a
Please.
quantum computer.
Bachelor
Do
of
not.
Science holder.
Bachelor of Science holder. No. No, I mean, so okay. Let's start from the top. There was like a blog post from Scott Aaronson, who he has this blog.
Who
that
is
he's
Scott
been-
Aaronson?
He's a blogger. He's a professor of computer science at University of Texas, Austin,
Mhm.
UT Austin. He has been like the director of their quantum computing stuff for a long time. He's like had this blog for 20 years writing about quantum computing stuff. And he writes about all kinds of other fun stuff. It's a great blog. Shuttle optimized.
Mhm.
I don't know.
But people like him for quantum because he's a quantum expert who's not heavily invested in quantum companies, right? Which
That's
is, this
exactly
is, I
right.
mean, we'll probably get into this more in another tangent, but like it's difficult to find people who know a lot about
Or
quantum
sound voices.
sound voices.
Yes.
Yeah. Where they're not
Level-headed.
benefited by spinning the narrative in one way or another.
And a lot of people who talk about quantum stuff like have no clue, like just less than a clue. Like for example, like important people, like who's the CEO of Microsoft? Satya Nadella. Yeah, he like talks about quantum, and it's just like big like fucking bong rip, and then like bro, Microsoft is leading the quantum.
We have
blah,
new
blah, blah.
physics,
Yeah.
Majorana particles, you know.
And it's all like bullshit. It's one of the it's sort of on the level of things that wind up being like political culture war issues, the level of bullshit in the discourse. You know, there's other things like, I don't know, traffic fatalities, where if somebody says something about traffic fatalities, you can be pretty sure that, you know, somebody did like a good faith study and
NTSB or whatever.
You can look at the cameras on the red
the
light.
there's a
highway
you know?
number
safety
somewhere,
people.
Yeah.
you know, but if you hear somebody talk about like, you know, green energy, right? Or, you know, climate change. Not that, you know, climate change is not happening. Green energy is not a good idea. But these are things that people like vastly overstate, that vastly understate the deficiencies of or overstate the rate of. And quantum is like very similar. Like
Yeah.
it's, you kind of have to assume that everything is bullshit.
And Scott is a great writer, and he's very good at like distilling what's going on, explaining it in a simple, easy to understand way if you're like a vaguely technical person. And so he wrote a blog post basically saying so much is happening in the last like year that he has kind of updated his timeline to be like a fault tolerant quantum computer is a live possibility within the next few years. And he had this funny quip in the blog post about like, oh, before the next election, if that happens, you know, or isn't
Right.
preempted by an AI or something like this. But
Third party quantum computer
Right.
Yeah.
steals the election, hacks
Right.
the whole election system.
That's right.
The
Hacks
superposition of all the votes, you know,
Mhm.
is collapsed into a single
waveform.
Yeah. And you know, he talked about like Google has made a bunch of advancements, a bunch of other people have made various
Who are the major
advancement.
players like in quantum world? Like
Big
I think
fake companies that don't produce anything.
yeah, because I was gonna
like-
say like AI, right? If we kind of have AI as like a different boogeyman that everyone's like, we're so close to AGI, and once we get AGI, it's so over for you guys. Like
Mhm.
I think of like OpenAI, I think of like China. I don't really know, like
It's
DeepSeek, whatever.
Google, IBM,
IBM and Google are probably the two biggest hitters
Yeah.
right now.
There's
Rigetti,
D-Wave.
but like D-Wave isn't. They do all kinds of other stuff that isn't even like normal quantum computing stuff. Too. I don't know.
Yeah, you're right.
They've been around for a long time.
all these
and
like
have done weird stuff.
QTum, like all these like random weird companies.
IonQ, or
Yeah,
whatever.
and none of these companies, to be clear, are producing anything useful right now.
today.
Their quantum divisions or the entire company, if it's a quantum company, are just resource money sinks.
They're producing things that are theoretically interesting and like kind of little tiny baby steps along the way to a, cryptographically relevant quantum computer, a fault tolerant quantum computer, a scalable quantum computer.
A cryptographically relevant quantum computer is a good thing to know, because that's what we're talking about when we talk about quantum computers in the context of Bitcoin. It's a quantum computer that can run Shor's algorithm to
in a reasonable amount of time.
Public keys of the size that we use in Bitcoin in a reasonable amount of time. And a reasonable amount of time could be like a year.
Totally.
Like if you can factor a public key in a year, like holy shit,
you get 50 Bitcoins,
we've got problems.
Or thousands of Bitcoins potential. I mean, I don't know what the biggest address.
Binance cold storage. That's what you go after. Yeah.
Right. How many Bitcoin do they have? They have like hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what was the fault? You said fault tolerant. So that's a different kind of.
Well, no. It's that. Well, I mean, what is
sure.
why don't we have quantum computers right now, Matthew?
Because there are fundamental breakthroughs that need to happen to get to a scalable quantum computer.
But so why can't
let's start at like what even is a quantum computer?
Right. Yeah.
So a quantum computer is a machine that uses the magic of quantum, the quantum magic in order to do computations that you like otherwise would not be able to do with a classical computer. There are like theoretical asymptotic speedups to certain algorithms like Shor's and Grover's and things like this. But they're specifically what you're doing is you're setting up these qubits.
So a classical computer uses bits, which are
just
definitely one or zero.
Definitely one or definitely zero.
Quantum computers use qubits,
which are a superposition of 0 and 1.
And is that spelled like Q-tips or is it like a Q?
K-U-B-I-T.
K.
Q.
I was like, bro, that wasn't even an option.
Q-U-B-I-T.
It's just Q-B-I-T. Yeah.
So so it's like qubit.
Yeah.
Qubit. Yeah.
It's qubit. Yeah, they're from Quebec.
Quantum.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So quantum bits are a superposition of 0 and 1.
Mm-hmm.
And what you mean by a superposition is that basically there's some probability that when you go and measure it, there is and I mean, we can get into the whole problem of like what even is measurement and all this stuff. There's, quantum is quantum mechanics even a fundamental theory of reality? There's all these questions that come up, but qubits are this superposition of 0 and 1, and the superposition is just like, there's some probability of it's a weighted coin, basically. Is a way to think of it. It's a weighted coin, but the magic comes when you get many different qubits and you entangle them together. And all entanglement means is that there's like some history dependence relating the qubits together.
Oh my god, I have so many stoner bro questions.
Yeah, and this is why we get into this. Is why
I'm like, bro, water holds memories.
Hold on for like a moment.
The water holds memories. It's a wave. It's all waves.
It's all vibes.
So there's these qubits. They're all entangled together, and what you want to do in order to make a quantum computer useful is you need to have these qubits interact with each other in just a special way such that like all the wrong answers get like canceled out. There are these like waves sloshing back and forth, and you want constructive interference and destructive interference. You want all the wrong answers to cancel out and the right answers to be amplified such that there's a very high probability. These are probabilistic computers. There's some high probability that the right answer, which is encoded in these qubits, giving you like zeros, ones. Whenever you go and measure a qubit, it's either a 0 or 1.
And I think that
that's like an important thing to know.
Before we
that's
talk,
like when you look at it, it collapses.
When you look at it, it collapses.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
Yep.
Before we talk mad shit about quantum computers, I actually think it's worth emphasizing how
this is the worst description of quantum.
Whatever.
This is really good.
It's very cool. It's worth emphasizing how cool and interesting quantum computers are, and why, in some fundamental way, they're interesting. So with classical computers, we have bits. They are 1 or 0, and we work we work very like the universe at a very small level. You know, we think there are sort of problems with quantum mechanics, whatever, inconsistencies, but the fundamental like components of the universe, of reality, do have this
wave
quantum
structure.
this structure where they're in many possible states.
And this is like electrons, right?
Electrons,
Like electron, we like when we learn like
everything.
the
Atom
Bohr
positions, like
everything.
Yeah.
are all in these weird sort of like probabilistic messes of states, and then we measure them down to some like fixed
Specific reification of
Yeah.
that, like,
And when we measure
thing.
them and observe them, that's when it's like a collapse.
That's when we
state.
get a single measurement out
Yeah.
probabilistically from the possible states. And
that's right.
for classical computers, we work very hard to get rid of all the quantum as early as possible.
Yes.
You know what I mean? We're like, no, we don't want these like quantum states. We want measurements to be done constantly that constantly collapse everything down.
Intel or
single
whatever
state.
has like many physicists working to make their transistors as small as possible without having like quantum tunneling effects.
Quantum
or,
tunneling
you
where
know,
like an electron like just jumps over the gates of the transistor in some unpleasant way.
and creates
Aw.
errors.
But
you know.
it's
This is making me fond of quantum computers.
but it's
Yeah.
but it's very interesting because essentially, you know, the universe, let's just take it as a given, it's made of these like quantum stuff, and we try to get rid of it in our classical computers to sort of deal with things that like make sense and aren't quantum. But the promise of quantum computers is like, no, wait, that stuff that we're trying to always collapse down to like a single measurable state provides us with additional power over a classical computer.
Yes.
And so a quantum computer is
and
like,
this
hey,
is a
given
somewhat
that
religious belief that people have.
Yeah,
that
it
there
sounds
will
extremely
be
religious to me.
a computer that is computationally relevant and gives you some capability that you did not have.
right.
There's-
But it's an interesting idea that like, oh, like, hey, like let's try to build a computer that takes advantage of the underlying computational power of the substrate.
So like rather than throwing out the stuff that's messy to make things simple, maybe there's like some gold in the messiness.
we can
Yeah.
these things are doing
That you get
useful work,
the
and so
perfect-
instead of removing that work, we can harness it.
Yeah. You have the waves all interfering with each other, and you get it so that the right answer comes out as like an amplified thing, and the wrong answers get suppressed.
I think
Mhm.
about it as being
It's like searching for the perfect wave as a surfer.
Yes.
You know, you have all the waves in the
Yes.
ocean and they're like interfering with each other, but then at some point you get that like coherent pattern where the waves
That
all
one
add up
big
together
wave.
and then you have that perfect surf, and that's the surf of your lifetime.
yeah.
Hell yeah.
I think you laugh at me, but I think that's
No,
a
that's
good
exactly
analogy.
right.
I think of it as being like GPU pass through.
I don't know
that-
what you mean.
Explain.
So
Yeah.
like when you're like in a virtual machine that's like a computer being like simulated by another computer, and you're like trying to do GPU stuff within that computer, it's going to be really slow because you're just going to be like sort of emulating a GPU. But with GPU pass through, you get access to the host
the actual
machines,
hardware.
the actual hardware, so that you can do useful things on the GPU.
Mm.
And so if we're in a simulation, quantum computing is like getting access to GPU pass through because you're able to like do work on the substrate directly
Yeah.
instead of like sort of this higher level like abstraction.
Oh, also, if you all want to learn more about this stuff, there's a couple of books that I might recommend. There's Quantum Computation and Quantum Information by Nielsen and Chuang. This is kind of like the classic reference text. There's also, once you've read all that and fully understood it, there's Quantum Computing Since Democritus by Scott Aaronson, the author of that blog post that we were talking about before.
Do you know
It's
who's on the
actually-
cover? Like what's the painting?
That's got to be Democritus, I assume.
Oh, that's Democritus.
He was the first. He was the atomist back in the Greek times, like
Oh.
300 BC. He kind of came up with the idea of atoms. As
Yeah,
a
like we'd
concept.
known about atoms for a long time. Like the
Yeah.
Greeks were right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Democritus is wild. The first chapter of this book is all about Democritus and atomism and like
Cool.
the belief. It's all atoms and void, and like that's everything. You know,
Mhm.
It's kinda
Chaos
fun.
versus order.
Mm.
But then he talks quite a bit about like quantum complexity theory and all this stuff. Like, oh, what's the difference between BQP and NP and all this stuff. You would enjoy this book.
One thing that I find interesting about the technical details of quantum computers is that it often veers between being very, very simple and then into being very, very complicated. Like
Yeah.
there are huge stretches of those books that I can just kind of understand and kind of read. And then they're like, oh, and then look at this equation. And I'm like, oh, fuck. Like I'm fucking fucked, right? As opposed to other topics where I'm like, I don't understand any of this at all.
And there's some like really incredible results that they go through, like in this book, where it's like there's this thing called the fault tolerance theorem, or and another one, like, or there's like the threshold theorem and all this stuff. Like basically they have these mathematical proofs that, assuming all the axioms of quantum mechanics and some really other basic assumptions, like that, errors are like local and uncorrelated between qubits and things like this, that you can do, like any sort of noise that gets pops up, you can squash it away with error correction codes and all this stuff. And that, like, you don't need to do an infinite amount of work in order to suppress errors. And that it's like everything that the theory says is that this stuff should be possible.
But unfortunately, you can't run a quantum algorithm on the books that we have here.
Right. Yeah.
You have to build a real quantum computer.
You have to build a real quantum computer.
And like there are lots of problems with that.
Yeah. So like today, there's like a bunch of different technologies that people use for implementing qubits. And then there's a bunch of problems with those different things. So like, for example, just like high level overview, there's Google uses these superconducting circuits. They're really like capable of getting low error rates, but it's like hard to connect them. Like the connections between the qubits is like hard. And they've amazingly been able to prove some interesting things about their quantum computers, despite these limitations.
Are
on
these the
small
sort
scales.
of breakthroughs that Scott Aaronson is like most interested in?
That's exactly
right
like
now?
the number one thing that he listed in his first blog post was this. What was it? It was out of time order correlations, right? Like basically they had this, set of qubits set up, and they applied a circuit to it, and then they applied some gate, and they applied the inverse of that circuit. They applied another gate. They applied the circuit again, and applied some other gate. Applied the inverse. They like do this like flipping of the switch, like on and off, if you will, and through the patterns that you see in the resulting measured qubits, they were able to show that, like, basically, it's like if it were totally not doing anything, it would either be like all zero or totally everything mixed up. But they were able to show that it's in this like weird intermediate realm where it's like, oh, there's like a butterfly effect from these gates, creating an interesting state that they can measure. And then they were able to show that this is very difficult to simulate on a classical computer. But, like some of the criticisms of this, if you'll allow me to just jump into
Please.
some of the problems with this, is that it's like, they got to think of how to phrase what I want to say. So the problem with it is that it's like, is it just an analog computer? That's what I want to say. Okay, getting back to it. What are the problems with this out of time order correlation thing? It's that you've gotten it into some like interesting quantum mechanical state that's difficult for a classical computer to simulate. But this is kind of like saying, like, oh, we got an aquarium with like, 10 to the 20 atoms in it, and we sloshed it back and forth and measured the height of the waves at some, like, an hour after we did like a bunch of sloshing or whatever. And, the fastest supercomputer in the world can't simulate that.
Right.
Versus, you can just run it on a quantum computer. There's all these like theorems and kind of proofs that analog computers, which are like back in the 40s.
What's an analog computer?
An analog computer is basically trying to use like instead of doing digital logic where or like Boolean logic on zeros and ones, like we were talking about, it's like, oh, you use like gears and
So use continuous values.
You use
values that can
continuous
vary
values.
between, negative 1,000 all the way continuously, incrementally up to, 1,000 instead of just 0 and 1s. You use, instead of signals like this, use signals that can vary over time.
Exactly. So, like in the 40s, people were solving differential equations and stuff with physical hardware that is not digital classical computing logic. It turned out that people were able to show that if you take into account errors and precision, this is not asymptotically more capable than a classical computer. And we've never found an actual example of a machine that can do computation asymptotically faster than a Turing machine if you take the errors into account.
And I think the way to understand that is that superficially, an analog computer it must be very powerful, right? Instead of 0 and 1, you get every possible value between 0 and 1.
A continuous, infinite number of values
that you can do work with. But in the real world, an analog computer has errors. It has a certain amount of errors that each step is going to introduce. Each component in the system is going to introduce.
The gear is like not ever so slightly out of alignment with this other thing. Or
exactly.
Whatever.
And so then once you have to take into account errors and you have to do error correction, let's say you get your error correction down to like, 0.1, okay? Well, in that case, it's kind of like a classical computer with 10 values, right? 0.0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, and 1, right? And so now, okay, well, now that you've done this error correction, it just looks like a classical computer with 10 values instead of 1 value, and you're not actually able to do any more computation than if you just threw like more bits at a classical computer.
Exactly.
And a question is, are quantum computers like this?
Are they just fancy analog computers, or are they genuinely different?
Once quantum systems have errors, they're very complicated, they're very noisy, they're physical systems. Once they have errors, is it sort of like, well, you've actually just discretized the system and it's no better than a discrete classical computer?
Yeah.
It feels to me like quantum is interesting, quantum computers are not as interesting.
It's unknown.
It's unknown. Yeah. So
but it's like, when you're talking about quantum in this sort of like theoretical level, I'm like,
it explains
cool.
a lot of stuff. Like quantum computers, like you can do these experiments that, with like light and particles and waves that quantum mechanics describes like exactly.
Yeah.
Right. But then it's like, can we do computation with that?
And it's an open question.
It's the attempt to like bring it back. That's like feels like there's
and so
if anybody is telling you that like for sure this is just an engineering problem, we know for a fact that quantum computers are more powerful than classical computers, go check their bags. Like they are invested in something somewhere, or they're like a crazy religious person. They have some like very specific beliefs that like are holding up their whole worldview or something like this.
And so
or the other way around. If someone's telling you it's definitely not possible, they're also giving you a religious opinion that is like, this is an open question that nobody has any answers to.
It's in the superposition.
It's in the superposition. And we haven't collapsed the wave function yet. We're still figuring it out.
So in practical quantum computers, noise is the problem.
Yes.
Right? That's the problem, is that there is noise, and it gets worse the bigger your quantum computer is.
When you say noise, what do you mean noise?
Like, a qubit is a physical system, right? And so, for example, if you get like a qubit, some implementation of a qubit, and a photon hits it, you're fucked. The photon hits the quantum computer.
But in theory, you're not fucked, because there's this quantum error correction. There are these theorems.
No, but I'm saying like on a single physical non-error corrected qubit, you're fucked. That's why we can't so a physical qubit is like an actual implementation of a qubit. It's like one of these superconducting surface or trapped ions or all of these different techniques, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh great, well we can build physical qubits. Why can't we do computation with those physical qubits? And the answer is noise. That there's going to be slightly more impedance or resistance. A photon is going to hit your shit and it's going to scramble the qubit. And so then this would be kind of fatal. We can't really build systems with quantum qubits which are physically, accurate.
And it has been fatal. So like in the last 10 years, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I just want to say that then the idea is, okay, maybe we can string together multiple error-prone physical qubits in a system that does error correction to produce logical qubits, which are themselves made up of some number of physical qubits that behave like idealized non-noisy qubits
up to some bound or something like this.
Yep.
You know, so there's also in the history of quantum computing, the last like 10 years or maybe like 15 years ago, people were trying to use these. They had some funny acronym for it. It was like noisy intermediate quantum computers, NIQCs, I think is what they were calling. And they were trying to use these for like simulations of quantum systems or doing quantum chemistry. They thought that they would be useful, and it turned out that that was an utter failure. Everything was just completely swamped in noise.
Why is that? Like the individual qubits were too noisy?
Yeah.
Just that?
Yeah, it was like, oh, like, you know, maybe they get one qubit that's able to do like, you know, like there's an error in like 1 in 1,000 measurements or something like this. But then you string them all together and you entangle all these qubits together, and then the errors just become more than 50%. Like you don't even have a hope of a chance of getting anything useful out of it.
And it's not just that you have a qubit with a 1 in 10 error rate and you add another qubit that has a 1 in 10 error rate and you get like a worse error rate.
Yeah.
It's that when you make your system bigger, you introduce heat and other forms of complexity that make each individual qubit noisier than there were before. The process of going from a 1 qubit system with a 10% error rate to a 2 qubit system means that your 2 qubits now have like a 11% error rate instead of a 10% error rate.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And like in theory, again, all of that is possible to suppress with enough engineering, and you know, because of these things like the fault tolerance theorem and all of this stuff, that like you have the ability to arbitrarily suppress errors, you know, with enough error correction. But we haven't, the current state of the world is that we have not gotten to a point where the error correction is able to create large quantum computing systems that don't have errors that just swamp the whole problem.
That's right. And another reason that Google's recent, like, okay, we got these quantum circuits, we kind of sampled it. One of the reasons why those kinds of results are a little bit suspect to me is that the purpose
random circuit sampling is, yeah.
That's right. Yeah. One of the reasons these are suspect to me is we don't care about building some quantum computer that has some quantum state and then measuring that quantum state. We care about creating a quantum computer and then setting up its quantum state specifically to either mirror some physical system if we're trying to do like chemistry simulation or whatever, or to represent some interesting problem like, you know, integer factoring or ECC factoring, set up a quantum state that measures that represents that system or that problem, and then measure it to get a useful answer.
Yes.
We don't care about like, oh, look, you built all these fucking Legos into some weird, useless sort of
Tower of Babylon.
Yeah, and then like measured
Babel.
how it fell, and then you were like, yeah, this would be impossible for a classical computer to simulate. It's like, yeah, but it's not doing any useful work.
Right.
And a lot of, I mean, so I've been very skeptical of quantum computing for a long time because a lot of the so-called like breakthrough results in quantum computing have this structure.
Yeah.
Where they're like, look, we factored this integer, but then does this actually relate to like real integer factoring? It's like, no, we only did like one step of the integer factorization, but we specifically set up the thing, the experiment to look like it was useful.
I want to say it was in 2012 or something like this. IBM, the largest number that has been factored using like Shor's algorithm on a like real quantum computer is 21. To 3 times
The
7.
Bitcoin number.
That's the
Bitcoin number.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's the only
Wait,
number
but it
they
could
need to
break
factor to break
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Bitcoin relies on not knowing that 21 is 3 times 7.
Right. Yes, exactly.
But even that was
they
fake.
snuck in the answer. I want to say the name of, there was like some paper that was like pretending to factor 21 or something. Like that was like the title of the paper.
The reason that it was fake is that
they did
like,
all this pre-computation.
You're like, okay, well, you factored 21. Like, surely that means that you can factor 20.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, no, not at all. Like, that's a completely different experiment that we would
22,
have to do.
or
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, they didn't build a general purpose factoring machine, right?
Yeah.
And then they come up with these other things where they're like, we factored like 28 billion. And it's like, oh, you happen to know the two factors and you happen to do all this classical pre-calculation.
Well, there's a whole other thing, which is that sometimes people call this quantum computing, but there are these quantum annealing systems. Adiabatic quantum computers.
Mhm.
But those are not universal quantum computers. You cannot do all the things that like a quantum Turing machine, if you will, can do. They're specifically set up to solve specific problems. And that is another area that has kind of fallen by the wayside in terms of like not actually being interesting. Like you're not really able to do the cryptographically relevant factoring that people want to be able to do with these, adiabatic quantum computers, it turns out. And the Shor's algorithm is like maximally difficult in some sense. It is. So the way that Shor's algorithm works is like there's kind of this pre-computation part. You like load up your quantum circuit with like all this stuff, and you mix all of the qubits all together, and you have to like put it in a blender, put all the qubits in a blender, get them all mixed up, and then amplify the answer using quantum Fourier transform, blah blah blah, inverse Fourier transform. It's like a whole thing, but it's all the qubits have to all be interacting with each other. And, again, there are these theorems that say you should, in theory, be able to error correct your way to the correct answer. But no one's been able to do it beyond the smallest examples where they're sneaking in the answer into the circuit, basically.
Right.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of money going into.
There's a lot of money.
Follow the money.
This.
A lot of money, and I just want to say the source of that money and the sort of the structure of the industry is a big red flag. So one of them is like the government.
Yeah,
governments are like, we need quantum computers first because our adversaries.
China might.
They're treating it like a nuke. Right?
Yes.
They're like, we can't let Russia get the nuke in the Cold War. This is like the Cold War thing. I mean, it's the same with AI, right? Like, although I guess, I don't know, governments are more interested in quantum computers than AI.
I think so, yeah.
Well, and one thing that always gets me, like whenever I express any skepticism towards this stuff, people say to me, oh, you're just like a physicist in 1938 who thought that who thought that nuclear weapons weren't possible, right? And it's like, and it is true. In 1938, there were like two guys who thought that a nuke was possible. And then eventually they were able to convince people to do the Manhattan Project. And lo and behold, we had a nuke in 1945, and it's like, what they'll say is sometimes people go and actually do a Manhattan Project and solve all these crazy engineering problems that people thought were impossible. But then I kind of counter to that with like, yeah, but there's also tons of examples where people got all hyped up and excited and then it never materialized.
More, especially in our current time. It's probably more often that people all get hyped and they all get on that wave, and then like the wave crests and nothing really comes of
And
it.
the government is classically a source of this kind of malinvestment, right? Where the government is like, we're going to put all this money into like, telepathy and like killing goats remotely or whatever,
Well, we could get into that.
Yeah.
The ones that they succeed go underground.
So the red flags are, okay, the government is involved, right? A lot of the funding is not coming from like rational market actors. It's coming from the government that steals all our money and puts it in other things.
Can I tell you guys about a conspiracy?
Wait, let me finish my
sorry.
little.
I'm sorry, Casey.
And then it also has a military angle. That's another source of massive malinvestment. We've got to build a plane that's marginally better than our other plane that costs 100 billion times as much, because we forgot how to make F-16s.
Yeah.
There's also academic involvement, which is a classical source of just overinvestment and like not being driven by a rational, possibility of producing anything. There's also European involvement.
Yes.
Okay.
The Europeans are always way ahead on quantum computing.
The Europeans are way ahead of quantum computers. And like, well, what are the things that like can succeed in Europe? There are things that have like massive amounts of top-down funding, right? Where there's no regulation involved because reality isn't involved. You're not making anything. You're making a quantum computer in like a lab.
Though to be fair, the Large Hadron Collider, that happened in Europe, and we failed to build our superconducting super collider in Texas.
But what did that get us? Like fucking nothing. It confirmed like the existence of some boson, right?
That we theorized in 1967.
It doesn't change anything. It has zero practical applications.
We could have opened a portal to hell. But again, this goes underground.
So anyways, but
they did think that we were going to open up a portal to hell.
What
so
I'm
this
saying.
is the four
But
horsemen.
The
four
If they
horsemen
did,
of
we wouldn't know.
malinvestment is
Right.
Europe, the government, military, and academia.
Absolutely.
right?
I can't even think, well, VCs, but they're now involved too.
But VCs don't even have to have a rational market outlook. Like they get all this fucking funding.
That's what I'm
like,
saying. Yeah, it's the
They're
fifth
like, okay,
horseman.
maybe the government will buy our bags.
A conspiracy theory about suppressing like research areas that ended up being extremely fruitful.
Mm-hmm.
There's this amazing paper from 1995 about I think it was a person's PhD thesis where they had these FPGAs from Xilinx,
These programmable computing elements.
programmable hardware, and they were doing these like really interesting evolutionary algorithms over these FPGAs, and they like were able to make some like really crazy things that
They were able to do some sort of signal
differentiation
where they were able to distinguish between like a 10 hertz signal and a 1 hertz signal.
Yeah.
And it used like 100 times, like 1/10 of the amount of hardware that a handwritten version would make. And they did it by just evolving random circuits on the FPGA.
Exactly. And doing like kind of, you generate a bunch of different, you have a genetic algorithm over it and you like mate the different circuits together and build up this whole thing.
Whoa.
And but it turns out that like those FPGAs that allow you to do the like introspection on the specific gates, that has all disappeared. Like Xilinx doesn't make those machines anymore. And it's very, very difficult to find them. Like they basically don't exist.
Yeah.
And my conspiracy theory is that it turned out that that was extremely valuable to doing like really crazy stuff, and that they were like, they told Xilinx like, no, you can't make
They
these.
shipped that off to the breakaway civilization.
Right.
I mean,
Okay.
the
Yeah.
anti-conspiracy theory is that this technique is just like incredibly like noisy, and you produce a circuit that works on this, not even this one
Specific
model of
dumb
FPGA,
problem.
but the specific instance of the FPGA.
Yes.
Because of like weird ways that the doping is wrong, and it doesn't work on another FPGA of the same model.
In the thesis, they accidentally left the window open overnight, and then the circuit stopped working.
Yeah,
and then
so
it broke.
See,
But then what they did was they swept the temperature up and down over the course of training or like
and made it
building
robust to
and made it
temperature
robust
changes.
to temperature changes.
See,
So
this makes me, when you talk about things like the trapped ion or the window being open and it doesn't work, it makes me feel like these quantum things, they don't want to be trapped and experimented on. They want to, I don't know if they're collapsing. They want to,
They don't
like,
want to collapse.
what they don't, is it that they're I don't know enough, like, forming my sort of spiritual vibes take. This is my contribution to stoner bro physics. Like, these things don't want to be trapped and experimented on. They want to escape.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, we're torturing them.
we are torturing them. And and you're like maximally torturing the quantum computer with Shor's algorithm.
That's why they really don't like it.
They really don't like the universe. Actually, there's this
God
amazing
is frowning
quote.
on this.
There's this amazing quote from who's the WikiLeaks guy?
Julian Assange.
Yeah, Julian Assange. He had this amazing quote that was like, the universe believes in cryptography. It's like somehow we've found ourselves in some world where cryptography is possible, and like, and maybe we'll find that we're in a world where it's actually not possible. Though we should also talk about the mitigations to quantum computers, like for Bitcoin. Like, it's not just completely over if.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, like, my understanding of like the current quantum Bitcoin discourse is that there's certain things that are like easy safety measures that could be taken. Is that
I don't know if I would call them easy.
Not really. There's some.
Well,
There's
okay,
some.
see, this is where the VCs put in that word. They're like, easy. It's actually easy. We could just do these little things. We
That's
could build these little companies.
But it is possible to make post-quantum cryptographic signature algorithms that are resistant to quantum computers.
That's right.
But they have weird trade-offs.
And some of them are being rolled out and standardized right now.
Yeah, your browser, your iPhone, like iMessage has post-quantum cryptography in it now.
Yeah, and you might ask, well, okay, great. Why don't we just use that in Bitcoin?
Yeah.
The problem is that the public keys are large or the signatures are large.
Or the computation is extremely difficult or like memory intensive. Like
I don't know if we have compact signatures. Do we have compact signatures and compact pub keys where the computation is the only bad part?
I believe so. I might be wrong about that, but I want to say that there are some things.
I want to say we don't.
But it's just like horrible on the compute front.
Bad trade-offs. And the reason that
something has to give.
The reason that we can roll out quantum signatures in like the browser, for example, is like, look, if your browser has to send 10 kilobytes of extra data when it opens a connection, it just doesn't matter. You're downloading hundreds of gigabytes of porn, you know, it doesn't matter, right? You're downloading
the node runners all around the world.
Yeah.
It's like these post-quantum signature algorithms are totally fine in a browser context, but are brutal in a Bitcoin context.
In Bitcoin, the best we can do, I think it would reduce Bitcoin down to like 1 transaction per second or something.
And you also have the problem...
If we kept the current block size.
And you also have the problem of Satoshi's coins or, you know, whatever. There's like I want to say it's like a third of all Bitcoin out there, or maybe even more, is vulnerable to a quantum computer.
Now we sort of have to get into the difference between a long-range attack and a short-range attack.
Yeah.
A long-range attack is where you have a quantum adversary, but once they have the public key, it takes them, you know, days or even maybe hours to factor it into a private key. And so this means that against the long-range attacker, if the public key is only revealed for a short amount of time, right? For example, if you broadcast a transaction and it immediately gets into a block, if you broadcast a transaction that reveals the public key and then it immediately gets into a block, you're okay.
Yeah.
Whereas now we have to get into different kinds of address types. So the earliest address types in Bitcoin are pay to pub key and pay to pub key hash. And pay to pub key, you say in the transaction, this is the pub key that should be able to spend this output. And in pay to pub key hash, you say this is the hash of the pub key that can spend the output. And so a pay to pub key hash is not vulnerable to a long range attacker, because a long range attacker sees the pub key hash and then the transaction spend is broadcast and they see the pub key, but they don't have enough time before it gets into a block to reverse it into the private key. But if you have a short range attacker, both pay to pub key and pay to pub key hash are vulnerable, because they pay to pub key, you know, they can factor it. Pay to pub key hash, the spend transaction is broadcast, and before it can get into a block, they reverse it into the private key and double spend it, paying themselves more money to more in fees to get their transaction prioritized, and they're able to steal the funds.
The practical takeaway from that is like, please don't reuse addresses.
Except that's not true
except
anymore.
for the How Many Podcast donation address, which we
okay,
reuse every
excuse me,
single episode. You can find in the description.
Yeah. But so that's actually no longer true. And the reason is that Taproot.
Yes. Okay, that's excuse me, specifically for pay to pub key hash.
Specifically,
don't reuse pay to pub key hash addresses.
Yeah.
Are we doing that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Taproot is vulnerable just as it stands.
Taproot is essentially pay to pub key or reveal a leaf and use that as the spending condition. And so Taproot addresses are inherently vulnerable. It's kind of odd that they didn't just make Taproot like pay to Taproot hash, where you reveal the hash of the key and then, you know, do it. But they did it. It saved some space, you know, whatever. So yeah, I think this like long range versus short range, like hash pub key or non-hash pub key, is kind of like not something that's worthwhile to focus on. First, because there's so much pay to pub key outputs. Second, because there's so many reused pay to pub key hash outputs.
Yeah.
And third, because Taproot is inherently vulnerable. And I think the reason that Taproot didn't have this protection is that Peter Willow looked at actual use on chain and was like, look, like, you know, half of all Bitcoin is pay to pub key or from a reused address. We shouldn't spend the extra space to make Taproot non-vulnerable, because, you know, people are just going to reuse addresses anyways, and we have an existential problem if it comes around, regardless of whether it's short range or long range.
Totally.
Yep. So yeah, that's the big problem for Bitcoin. The coins are vulnerable. The coins are not happy. And it leads to a very interesting question, which is like, if there was a quantum computer or a near-term threat of a quantum computer, and we have some sort of upgrade path, do we freeze? What do we do with all the quantum vulnerable coins? You know, do we freeze them? You know,
it's like either way you're screwed. It's freezing or what's the other one? Burning,
burning, freezing.
Burning, freezing. What's the other?
Confiscation, freezing, or to the victor go the spoils.
Right, to the victor
which I think is the
spoils.
right way. I think like, listen, like we're not some nanny state, retards, right? The people who are working on quantum computers, listen, if they get it to work,
if
they've worked
they get
very
Satoshi's
hard.
gold, like they deserve
Satoshi's gold. Exactly.
And they're going to need it, for the hole that they've put themselves
and then
in
order to pay for the quantum computing industry, they need Satoshi's gold.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And and then we'll upgrade to some sort of post-quantum scheme that allows us to continue. And to the victor goes the spoils. But people talk about like, oh, we're just gonna like do like a 3-month freeze of everything. You have to move all your coins within this like short window, or you're done.
Yep.
People love a shock like that.
Yeah.
Like they want to be in charge of a shock like that. They want to be at the helm saying, okay, guys, you all have to do what I say.
And you get into these interesting ethical questions though. It's like, oh, you're kind of stealing coins either way. Like if there is a real quantum computer that can actually steal people's money, it's like there's no good way out for the old coins.
There are some good ways out. One really interesting thing is that even if you have a short range attacker, which would make pay to pub key hash vulnerable.
Yeah.
If your private key is derived from some seed, then you can do a zero knowledge proof that you knew the seed that it was derived from, that the attacker can't do.
Yeah.
But I think that would be a hard fork because it would require you to be able to spend.
There's still some people who just had bag of keys. Like,
right. And the original Bitcoin was bag of keys.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, so that isn't that helpful for everybody, but for a lot of people that would be a good mitigation.
Yeah.
But then putting zero knowledge proofs on chain,
they're also huge. They also another thing is not just that post quantum cryptography is big. That's not actually the only problem. If post quantum cryptography was big, but we were 100% sure that some scheme was like the best way to do it, I think that would actually even be a lesser problem. The real problem is that there's many different post-quantum security schemes. They're all bad in different ways.
And
they all
some
have
of them
trade-offs.
get broken by classical computers after.
I really wanted to make a joke at some point. Maybe now's the right time to do it. Is that we're lucky that the quantum cryptographers are on Shor's algorithm.
That's right.
Because then they could break our podcast,
That's
and then
right.
we'd never be able to put our takes out there ever again. Although maybe they are making progress on Shor's algorithm if your mic was sort of rotating in and out of superposition of recording.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, so we don't know what happened with Casey's audio. We'll see. Anyway, where were we? You guys were talking about Bitcoin specific stuff.
Yeah, we were talking about.
I mean, basically, Bitcoin is fucked, and we're never going to come to consensus about what post-quantum cryptography is.
Can't even come to consensus about things that are like way easier.
Like fucking OPSI TV, can't come to consensus about that.
I don't know. I feel like if there were like an actual threat, we could band together. I believe in our ability to come together and solve.
You're not on Bitcoin Twitter.
Yeah, I'm not on Bitcoin Twitter.
But you might be right. You might be more representative of like the normal Bitcoiners.
And also there's like maybe a somewhat, I don't want to say revealed, like the market knows, right? The market knows that this stuff is like
right.
kind of suspect, or it's on a much longer time horizon than the hypesters are kind of throwing out there. Speaking about that, actually, Scott Aaronson had a follow-up blog post to his original one about, all the exciting new developments in quantum computing in the last year. And the title of the post was something like, quantum investor bros, have you no shame?
Mhm.
And he took a bunch of selected quotes from Twitter where people were like shamelessly hyping their bags on like their IonQ stock, which went public or whatever. And, they're like, and basically Scott Aaronson was like, bro, I was talking about like them factoring 22, not,
Right.
like not a cryptographically relevant quantum computer in the next.
Well, they probably
2 or
just had
3 years.
ChatGPT write their hype post. They were like,
Right.
ChatGPT, read
Well,
this
nobody
article.
understands this shit, so these people are all filtering it through like ChatGPT explain Scott
yeah.
Aaron's blog post to me.
Yeah,
And
and-
ChatGPT, they're on like the sycophantic model of ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is like,
They're
this
going
is
to
so
4.0.
good for your bags.
Yeah.
My personal bellwether is like when a certain group of Bitcoin cryptographers and implementers start working on post-quantum stuff. So like I'll start to worry when Peter Willa is like working on libsecp post-quantum and like thinking about how to
There were a bunch of
implement it
people who went to that Presidio Bitcoin Quantum Summit
Mhm.
thing, the
Yep.
Bitcoin Quantum Summit. That was like earlier this year. I went to that. It was fun. It was
Mhm.
good.
I mean, the takes I got from people there, because when that happened afterward, we were like, okay, we want to have someone on the podcast to talk about quantum, like who's the expert from that event. And everyone that I asked said like, oh, no one knows anything.
Yeah.
Like you were still the best option basically for
I'm
quantum
here. That's
expert.
why I'm here.
Yeah, like
You
it's
know,
I the vibe I got, and I think they did like a pre and post survey, right, of
Yeah.
people's feelings, and it went from being like, oh, it's not a problem. Like people seemed more polarized, I think, at the beginning, where they were either like, oh, this is a problem, or it's not a problem, and then people were a little bit more like, maybe it's a little bit of a problem.
I feel like the distribution shifted. Like
Yeah.
most people were in the I don't know, and then there were more people than at the beginning who said this stuff's fake. I'm more bearish on quantum computing, and there were also more people who were like, this is a real problem. Like I would say proportionally there were more people who thought that this was a real
Yeah.
problem than not. But
But even
it
still,
was
there
more
was no
people.
one anyone could point to that I talked to that was like, oh, this person really convinced me, or this
Yeah.
person had a really insightful take. It was sort of just like, if you vibe on a thing for 2 days straight, you're going to be like, yeah, I care
I
more
ca-
about
I-
that thing.
Yeah.
I care more about the thing. But I had some brilliant point about this.
A very brilliant point.
Yeah,
I'm
I had
sure.
some amazing thing to say.
What were we talking about? No, I mean, we had something before I derailed. It was like Presidio Bitcoin, the Quantum Bitcoin, the blog post.
I think it's important. The precautionary principle is good here. It's like we do need to be on top of this stuff. Like, and I'm it's heartening to me that people are caring about it, even if it's like this extremely low probability. Like, it's great that we're like concerned about these like kind of long-term, somewhat speculative things and not like immediate crises right now,
Hmm.
I don't know.
I
Like-
mean, I think actually your point about the like Peter Willow types coming back or care, like awakening the sleeping giants to care about these issues is actually a good one, where it's like, if we were in a situation where the ancient Bitcoin whales that cared about Bitcoin early on had to come back and start caring about Bitcoin again, like we'd probably be in a better situation. Like even if it's a crisis that brings them back,
The thing is the people that I mentioned are still kind of working on Bitcoin.
what
Like
are they doing?
Peter Willa is behind libsecp 256k, which is Bitcoin's custom cryptography library that implements Bitcoin's cryptographic primitives. Who else did I mention?
No, you just mentioned him, I think.
GMAX is kind of back, Ghislaine
Just like-
Maxwell is back working on
Ghislaine
Bitcoin.
Maxwell is back
Yeah,
commenting on Reddit.
she's handling it.
No, it's like, I don't know. I just mean more like if they were like all sprung into like your point about like, well, if there really was this crisis, we could spring into action, we could fix it. Like, I think that's true, or it's like a better situation for Bitcoin to be in, where it's like if there genuinely was a threat that people felt invested in solving, as opposed to just sort of like it feels like right now everyone's sort of just in their own curiosities. They're like, well, I kind of like this, or I'm
Yeah.
kind of interested in this. But if there really was this sort of like critical thing that everyone had to figure out, I think I agree with you that we could.
Taj Georgia, I can't pronounce his name, but he had a great talk, and this was like one of the big takeaways that I had from the conference, which was that like he had this proposal called the lifeboat, which was like this way to get your coins into a quantum resistant thing pretty quickly.
Just send it to me.
Well,
I'm
he
the
was
lifeboat.
he was kind of suggesting using this proposal from like 2014, the Fox coin, which is kind of an interesting thing where you're using hashes instead of normal digital signatures to like save people's coins. But what he said was it's the fear of quantum computing that is more of a problem than the actual quantum computer. Like we need to relieve people's fear about the quantum computer, and that is more important. You know,
we have to fight FUD.
Yeah, the fear.
That's basically that's the
nothing to
most
fear.
insightful talk from Presidio Bitcoin
The only thing
Quantum
to fear
Bitcoin
is fear
conversation.
itself.
The only thing
Fear
to
is the
fear is
mind
fear
killer.
itself. Fear is the mind killer, and that was a really great takeaway. It's like fear is the mind killer, and
FUD is the mind killer.
FUD is the
Fun
mind
is the mind
killer.
killer.
Yeah,
And that, like, you know, if
we
we
need to
had
Gom
some,
Jabbar all of the Bitcoiners.
we really do.
If
A lot of
if
them
you
wouldn't
pull your
make
hand
it.
out of the Gom Jabbar or the
if you
box,
sell,
yeah, then you lose your coins.
Yeah, your
Yeah.
coins are
well,
confiscated.
you don't get a vote in the quantum computing.
No, let's take their coins.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the coins
yeah,
go away.
yeah.
The coins go in the lifeboat.
Yeah, but I liked that idea of like having something ready to go that would relieve the fear.
That makes sense. Yeah, having
know-
a soft fork that like we have a soft fork, it's ready. If we
If
see
you don't have to
signs-
do anything today, but if there were a cryptographically relevant quantum computer that happened, you could get in the lifeboat and we would be like, I mean, we're still in the lifeboat, like things are not good, but you're in a better situation. You're not completely screwed.
You're the women and children on the Titanic.
You're the women and children on the Titanic.
In
yeah.
a
And
way,
Michael Saylor is in the light. Did you see the AI image that he posted of himself in the life raft coming off the Titanic?
No.
Really good stuff. Jason put it up here. Michael Saylor's like posting all of these like AI images of himself that are like yassified. Like he's a boxer. He's in the lifeboat. The Titanic is like sinking behind him, but then the Titanic is orange, so it seems like it's Bitcoin that's sinking, and he's like escaping Bitcoin. Anyway, so you can be in the lifeboat with Michael Saylor.
Sure.
But I think what you're saying actually is what I was getting at with my impression was that there were like the easy solutions. Not that the solution is easy to implement, but that there's things we could do now
yes.
that would make people feel like, okay, we have options if or when this is a thing.
Right. We have lifeboat. We have like, there were a whole bunch of different proposals at the thing that were all like, they all had different trade-offs, but it was some version of, let's do something today that like reduces the fear,
Yeah.
you know, and at least makes it so that we have something that we can move to, you know, because it's like, again,
The best we can do.
it's
like,
the best we can do.
but there are real risks to adopting something a little too early,
yeah,
right? Like,
or
course.
adopting some shitty like these post-quantum signature schemes. They're very complicated.
Yeah.
And cryptography.
and some of them were proven to be breakable by classical computers.
That's right.
Like, you know, not all of them are, you know, and like China.
Probably if we did do some sort of post-quantum algorithm, you would be required to provide both a classical signature and a quantum proof signature, and they would both have to be.
I want to say that like almost all of the like browser implementations
That's
or
right.
iMessage are doing both simultaneously.
And you have to produce
You have to do
valid
both.
signatures for both, so that if we have just a busted quantum signature algorithm, it's not trivially breakable.
yeah.
What other
don't know.
beats did we need to hit?
Let's end with the stoner bro quantum interpretations.
Oh, okay. Let me think. Well, I think the first thing that this all makes me think of is like, okay, why did Atlantis fall? Atlantis,
Right, of course, naturally.
Naturally.
I gotta go back to Atlantis. Atlantis fell because of the tech bros' hubris. Ultimately,
That's right.
Atlantis was this like very like technologically advanced civilization that became divorced from like its relationship to nature and to God, and it's like similar sort of like Tower of Babel situation where like they had this big crisis that wasn't even really related. Like the technology couldn't save them, and then they sunk into the ocean,
Mhm.
and they were like felled by their own hubris. And that's
Right.
like that's what a lot of like people like me are kind of looking at in our civilization now, where it's like, are we repeating Atlantis's failures of like worshiping technology and becoming hubristic to our own technology, and then we're just going to be like wiped out by something that's like that defeats the technology essentially. And so when you're talking about like I don't know, these attempts to distill chaos into order, that like everything must collapse into order, and like, oh, maybe there's something in the chaos, but like the way that we make sense of the chaos is still just like collapsing it into order. It does feel to me like I don't know. I think the solution here is like some level of like spiritual grounding or like consciousness evolution that needs to happen. Otherwise, the quantum computers or something else will just like take us out. Like if the quantum computers take us out, I just think that that's like we're just sort of like repeating an Atlantis cycle, and maybe that's like always the way it was going to go. So I don't know. That's where like I feel a little bit more settled on quantum now, where I think I'm actually more in my stoner bro view of quantum. Like we were talking earlier, like you said, you might debunk some of the stoner bro quantum stuff, and maybe there's specific things.
Well, the
we
main
can
word is like
debunk.
the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics.
Sure, like I'm not necessarily. I think I'm maybe making my own branch of stoner bro quantum physics.
You're really, it's not
my
even
own
stoner
school
bro.
of thought.
Yeah.
Yeah,
stoner
your own
ho.
interpretation of quantum
Stoner
mechanics.
ho, yeah, where it's like if the quantum computers are going to defeat us, then it's like we have not consciously evolved enough in order to be like ready to handle quantum computers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one take. I mean, everyone always asks me about quantum that are like technology, spirituality people, because they like the, oh, you create your own reality stuff. What are your take? I mean, this is now getting back to like more quantum theory rather than quantum computers. Whenever people talk about
more my
like,
wheelhouse.
right, exactly. Getting back to basics. When people talk about things like, oh, well, quantum proves that like, bro, it's just your perception that's creating reality. Like, what do you think of these kind of takes?
I think, I mean, there's so many different interpretations of quantum mechanics. Like, if you'll allow me to go off for a second.
I would love for you to go off for a second.
There's like the standard interpretation of quantum mechanics, which is like, okay, we have these Dirac von Neumann axioms and we take those as gospel, that there's this magical thing called measurement that collapses the wave function down to a single answer, right? And like, look no further. Like that is the be all end all of the discussion. We cannot look further beyond that. And I always kind of like react to that. Like, no, I want to know what's inside the measurement process. Like am I somehow special? Is like in standard quantum theory, there is this like kind of dualist separation between the classical world and the quantum world, like Plato's cave or something like,
right.
Oh, we're seeing the shadows dancing on the cave wall, but like, oh, maybe with a quantum computer, we can turn around and actually go and look at the real things that aren't the shadows or something,
escape the cave,
jailbreak the simulation or what have you. Though I'm also not that big of a fan of simulation theory, I guess. I don't know. But like there really hasn't been much progress on this, like these fundamental questions of like, is quantum mechanics real? Like, or is it just an effective description of reality? And like, there's some deeper theory, right?
Yeah.
And there's there's like several different answers to that. I mean, there's like an infinite number of answers to this, but like some interesting
many worlds
there's
level of answers to this.
There's some other big ones out there. There's the many worlds interpretation, which is basically like, oh, we're constantly on these infinite branching paths of different
like
worlds.
We have like infinite timelines that are existing concurrently
in parallel,
and then you can like
at
jump timelines.
At every point that like a quantum system is collapsing into a single state,
it's a split.
It's actually branching into all possible states that we like continue along in one.
And you don't like this because
there's nothing like measurable about this. It's like it doesn't give you any ability to make further predictions about quantum mechanics or physics. There's no additional like level of experimental verification that you get out of that. It's just like, oh, okay, that helps you. You just say, oh, the algebra is real. Like they take the math and they're like, no, the math is real. Like when you look at the math, it does kind of have this like, oh, there's many things happening all at once, and then we just like select one, and you just take that as like fundamental, right? Like it implies that like, oh, that like the Hamiltonian, or like that's like a real thing, and that it's actually all linear and for real, and that there's no non-linearity at all.
don't understand this many worlds thing of like you branch off when you collapse.
Well, you have a quantum state that's some superposition of like all possible
Or you
states.
have the universal wave function. You have a wave function of the whole universe.
Well, like for example, it's like, okay, let's say you're measuring a qubit, and you could either measure it as being on with some probability or like off with some probability. And instead of the interpretation being you measure it, it collapses the waveform, and it's on or off, actually the universe branches at that point into a universe where you measured that it was on and a universe that you measured it was off. Or many universes where the distribution of the measurement is like according to the probability of those.
So like by
universes.
not measuring, you're in like a unified world, but then when you make the measurement, that's when you
every
like branch
measurement,
off.
every collapse of a quantum state leads to this bifurcation or forking of reality into many concurrent realities.
These infinite many.
These
concurrent
interpretations,
realities.
when you read something in popular science, which is like many worlds, blah blah blah, what happened? Like the mechanism behind that is that physicists don't agree at all, right?
Yeah.
And some journalist talked to a physicist, and that physicist told
some journalists talk to a physicist.
That's right. And that physicist told the journalist their pet interpretation that nobody agrees with.
It's
about
maybe
what's
like
happening.
15 to 20% of physicists are like many worldsers.
Yeah. And then the journalist is like, well, that's how it is. I'm reporting, the physics. You know?
I mean, I do kind of feel like we jump timelines sometimes, though. Like, I feel like 2016, we jumped a timeline. Does it feel like we're on a different timeline
But
now?
is that just your like subjective experience?
Yeah, but isn't that the whole point?
Yeah.
It's like, right? Isn't that
I
the
mean,
whole...
I think the thing that I don't like about many worlds is that it's let's go to sleep. Let's stop asking questions again. It's similar to the first answer. It's just like, no, the math is real. We believe the math, and that's it. It's also a discussion ender.
It's right. I think that's really the main problem that I have with like stoner
And it's
bro
a very
quantum
Rick and
physicists.
Morty,
Yeah.
like,
In general,
level.
it's like I feel like it sort of ends the conversation in this kind of like hand wavy sort of like
anything is
way.
possible.
Yeah. Like
know?
any you can manifest anything, you can do whatever, you can be anything. I could levitate right now if only I could like collapse the waveform in that direction or whatever. You know, like it ends up being this kind of like that's more my issue with it than like it being real or not real is that it's conversation ending.
There was one of my favorite interpretations of quantum mechanics is this is actually like just this last year, maybe 2024 or something like this. There's this professor at Harvard, Jacob Barandas, who came up with this thing that he called indivisible stochastic processes, which is he showed that it was isomorphic to standard quantum mechanics, which was really cool.
What does that mean?
So there's, as I said, there's like the Dirac von Neumann axioms for standard quantum mechanics, and there's like all these problems with these axioms, right? Like, the measurement collapsing the wave function, all this stuff, and there's like all the, like you talk about, Hilbert spaces, and there's all this math that's in there that's like it feels very abstract, right? And kind of crazy, and like there's complex numbers everywhere, and like what's up with that? And you have this differential equation that gives you everything. And basically what this guy did was he said, okay, quantum mechanics is just a fancy way of doing probability theory, standard normal probability theory, except we're going to relax a couple of rules that,
we're going to smooth brain a couple aspects.
Well, I feel, it's both smooth brain and also like galaxy braining.
Right.
A couple of aspects.
That's
you're
the
like,
real truth. The smooth brains are the ones that are galaxy braining.
Right. You get the bell curve.
Right.
But so what he said was, okay, in most probability theory textbooks, it's like the very first page, they're like, okay, we're going to make this assumption, and we're going to make the assumption through the whole book. And then at the end, we're going to be like, oh, okay. Well, so the assumption that they make is that things are Markovian, that basically the state of the world right now tells you everything you need to know about predicting the next state of the world.
That it doesn't depend on the history of the world.
It doesn't depend on the history.
That you don't need to go back to predict the state after this one. You don't need to go to the state before this one.
You just
Exactly.
need
You can
this
just look at
moment.
the current state,
Yeah.
and that tells you about the evolution of the world.
Exactly.
That's Markovian?
Yes, that's
Okay.
the Markov assumption. And like
And
every
that's
probability
true.
theory.
You believe in that?
Well, it's relevant for Markovian probability theory. If you don't depend upon the history, then yeah, sure. That's a very easy, a great assumption to make the math easy.
See, I would
But-
put this in stoner bro like logic, where it's like you have all these like preconceived beliefs that define your reality in your mind,
Mhm.
and if you can just like edit those in this present moment through like meditation or whatever, doing psychedelics or whatever, that you can like change your future in ways that are completely independent of the past that you've had. Anyway, we're in the stoner bro section. Sorry guys, I get a little bit of time.
Another fun stoner bro question is there one history? Is the past fully
exactly Mandela effect? But this is my point.
Yeah.
The Mandela effect. That's also where I get into like this timeline jump stuff, where it's like maybe some people were in this other timeline, they came back to this time. Like I don't know how the timelines sync up.
So then what this guy says is we're going to drop the Markov assumption.
Okay.
So you can have history dependence, and we're going to have a special rule for basically like having these, he calls them division events, but basically like in between two states of the world, you don't get any ability to like see what happens in between those two states of the world.
Mhm.
You cannot.
You have one state
divide-
and another state, and there's stuff in between those, but you don't get any information.
Exactly. It's like, okay, there's one state of the world, and then there's a state of the world at some later time, and you know about that, what that state of the world is. But in between those states, you cannot infinitely subdivide that transition from the one state to the other state into like a marching forward of the probability theory for it. And it turns out that literally this is all you do, and it is exactly equivalent to quantum mechanics.
And so what does that tell you?
I think what it tells you is that quantum mechanics isn't as spooky as we think it is. It's like, like people always talk about like, oh, quantum mechanics is this magical, mysterious thing. The quantum computer's doing infinite parallel computations in other worlds. And then you're like interfering those worlds together and bringing them together. It's like, no. It's just probability theory with history dependence. And like that's it. And you get like these snapshots of information updates.
Okay, so the
it's sort of like a
Markovian is like
desperatization of time, like a quantizing of time.
It's kind of a quantizing of time. That's exactly the right way to think about it. Now, in the model, I think he still has like a continuous time thing because it is isomorphic to quantum mechanics. Like basically, you could take this thing and do a translation, and you exactly reproduce quantum mechanics, including coherence, entanglement, decoherent, like all the stuff that we get. But the thing that I like about it is that it doesn't elevate the measurer into some special place. Like it's sort of a non-dual way of thinking about quantum mechanics. And it might be a better starting point for building up a modification to that theory that then gives you insight into the deeper theory.
Yeah.
Like, like we know that quantum mechanics is, well, okay, we don't know that quantum mechanics is wrong, but like there's a lot of things that points you to it's kind of just an effective
way
theory.
Of describing something.
Yeah. And that like this is maybe having it just be normal probability theory, like no differential equations, you might have differential equations, but like no Schrodinger's equation, no Hamiltonian, no Hilbert spaces, all this stuff. It's just normal probability theory with interference across, histories. And that gives you a kind of a deflated view of quantum mechanics that I kind of like.
It's not as like a hand wavy magic wishy-wash.
And it's maybe a better place. Like we have been stuck with standard quantum theory for like almost 100 years.
And I think by stuck you mean that it doesn't connect to our classical world in many ways. We can't just scale it up and get
exactly. We can't just scale it up and understand what is going on. And like actually in standard quantum mechanics, there's this thing that is often very misunderstood. There's this thing like Aaronson theorem, which is, I'm sorry, I'm getting into the math a little bit, but it's like Aaronson theorem basically says you can reproduce Newtonian mechanics in the expectation values of, like when you take the averages of what happens, you get Newtonian mechanics from standard quantum theory. But this is like often abused to say like, oh yeah, we have a straight translation from the quantum world up to the classical world. And it's like, you kind of have to get into the details of like, well, what is an expectation value? What does that actually mean? Like when I throw a ball up into the air, it follows like a very standard path that we can measure, right? Well, this brings in gravity. Gravity and quantum mechanics are like oil and water. Like you cannot merge them.
Basically, gravity is a phenomenon that exists at very large scales.
Yes.
And at very large scales, we have all our classical physics that works to explain, or not classical physics, but we have special relativity or general relativity.
Yeah.
That explains this stuff.
General relativity explains gravity.
General relativity explains gravity. But if you take quantum mechanics that has, that lets us understand interactions at a very, very small scale, like gravity doesn't exist down there. And up at the level of general relativity or special relativity,
general relativity,
at the level of general relativity, quantum mechanics doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And so it's not like you like scale down general relativity or scale up quantum mechanics and you got the other. It's just like we're like, yeah, at these two fundamental scales, we have different theories that don't interact at all to explain what happens.
And when you try to merge them, the math just goes into infinity. And that's how string theory kind of happened. And like people were like, oh, like let's just like, it turns out if you kick up the dimensions in these integrals, like, oh, they start converging and oh wow, we can do math again, but it also that causes all kinds of problems. Like it seems very circular to me. The fundamental question about quantum computers is, what is the relationship between the classical world that we see in our like everyday experience and the quantum world? And like we have tiny inklings of that connection, but we do not understand it at a really deep level. So this brings me to two other things. Another interpretation of quantum mechanics is there's this guy, Roger Penrose, who he's if you want some like whoa dude, stuff, he's got like, what is it, The Road to Reality? He's got like all these like kind of pop science books, but then you start reading it and he's like talking about like, oh, you take like a vibration of the blah, blah. It's a little bit difficult to parse, but he has these theories about gravitational collapse. He believes that, and I'm going to butcher the explanation, but he has this really interesting idea that basically gravity is kind of the reifier of quantum mechanics. It's like the thing that actually causes the collapse and stuff, and that like he kind of makes an argument that quantum computers won't scale because there's this assumption that you're going to be able to have infinite scaling of quantum state to large, or maybe not infinite, but like up to some very large bound. And we don't know what that bound is, but it's like what Roger Penrose says is that when you start getting to the scale where gravity starts mattering, the quantum
when you
effects,
open the window,
the quantum effects
it gets out the window.
Away.
The quantum effects go out the window.
The quantum effects can finally escape to freedom.
Exactly.
They go out the window.
And so what you get from this is that like, oh, maybe quantum computers work on some small scale, but they don't work when you scale them up to large systems.
How does this relate to things like dark energy? Because when you talk about gravity working at bigger scales, I then think about really, really big scales where gravity seems to not matter as much either, or we have these like other hand wavy things that we do to get around the effects of gravity. So like, is that related to quantum, or is that like a totally different question?
No, I don't think it's a totally different question.
It could be that like dark,
we just don't know anything.
Dark energy and dark gravity or whatever. Dark energy and dark matter are both due to some way that we're missing something about the large scale world.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, if quantum
once
is
we
small
figure out
scale,
the unified theory, we're like, oh, we don't need to add this like fudge factor anymore.
Yeah,
and in general relativity, actually, probably the largest discrepancy between theory and experiment is this question of like dark energy, dark matter stuff, where it's like, or dark energy really, but it's like if you do the quantum field theory calculation for like the vacuum energy, you get this like insane number that's crazy, and when you go out and try to measure it, it's like off by some like 2 or like 10 to the power 200 or something. Like this. That is a huge indication that like we are really, really deeply misunderstanding something about this connection between the large scale structures and the small scale structures.
See, that's where like, I think for me, like I was never in like quantum style physics, but then I was more in like the big physics part.
Yeah.
And it's like we have our own version of like, well, we just sort of like say something's magic and hand wave
Lambda,
and, like,
CDM,
whatever.
and
and like but I guess that could be a totally different regime. Like there could be quantum, classical, and then like a whole other regime that's unrelated to those things.
Yeah.
But I don't know. This is bro spinning out in my stoner road direction. But like I also think all the time like it's weird that when you split the atom, you get like a massive explosion that destroys everything around it, like fundamentally forever.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. There's just some weird aspect of like things that are very small and very big. I don't know, like having some weird relationship with each other that's outside of our like medium size relationship that we have a good understanding of. And I just don't know if those things are like, even like nuclear and quantum, like are those things related in any way? Are those totally different, like nuclear physics and quantum physics, like totally different?
I mean, that's a bajillion-dollar question, I think. Like.
Well, my other question I was going to ask you is like, we were talking about like, oh, well, if we just like figure out X, Y, or Z, then we have these breakthroughs, but we're like not in these breakthroughs. How do the UFOs blip in and out of existence? Is this related to quantum?
Maybe. I don't know. So here, wait, can I say one more thing about gravity?
And then we can get into UFOs.
Yeah, and then we can get into UFOs. So one more thing about gravity, which is that, and like there's a lot of reasons to not buy these arguments, but there's some really interesting papers about emergent gravity where it's like, I saw this paper a while ago where it was like, okay, you assume that the whole universe is like a bath of qubits. It's like you have like qubits everywhere. You have an ocean of qubits throughout all space and time, and they're interacting with each other. And you just assume the like standard statistical mechanics, right? You just do like the law of entropy and like all these other like, the macro states map to the micro states in this way, blah, blah, blah. And it turns out that you can get a 1/r² force, like quasi-force, that comes out of this theory. You get like a Newtonian gravity out of assuming that the world is like quantum and that there's statistical relationships between these qubits. And then there's like some other people who do some other things that show that like general relativity is also this like emergent effect of like statistics. That gravity is not like a fundamental force in the same way that like the strong force or the electromagnetism are like forces.
Gravity is probability.
Yeah, the gravity is this like statistical phenomena that happens when you talk about like entropy doing its thing, or like a thermal bath of these
the
things
primordial soup of qubits.
Of quantum stuff. Yeah. So, and I mean, like, again, there's like so many reasons to not believe in this theory.
But there's so many reasons to not believe in any of these theories.
Right.
Like, I don't know. No one knows.
But yeah, it's like you get into these questions of like, how does gravity play into all of this? And I mean, this has been like 100-year quixotic quest for physicists that nobody has any good answers for.
And we just keep throwing money.
Yeah, and we just keep throwing money at it. And, but it's like, I'm hopeful. My biggest hope for the quantum computing stuff is that we will find new physics. Like, I think all the people who are on the side of quantum computers
there could be a world where we figure out why we can't do quantum computers, and it unifies the large scale and the small scale.
100%.
Yes.
That's kind of what this is the Atlantis doesn't collapse direction.
Right.
Okay?
This has all happened before. It might not have to happen again.
Exactly.
Or something like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, on that note.
No, wait, I need to ask about the UFOs.
Oh my God. How long we've gone for so long. Everybody is lost. Like,
no. I actually think it's the opposite. I think people are, you know what? It blinks when it's clipping.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay, so we're good. because you guys both just laughed and then yours both.
there you
Yeah,
go.
that's what it's warning you that it's clipping. Okay, sorry. No, see, I think vote in the comments. Casey's half or Aaron's half of the episode. Which did you prefer? I think a lot of people are gonna like Aaron's half, but I wanted to ask about the UFOs.
Wait, but one more thing before we go to the
Okay.
UFOs. Okay, here's a fun question about quantum computers. So this gets into the like, well, I won't say anything. I'm going to ask the question, and then you guys tell me your answers.
Okay.
And then, now this might be a more Casey question because it's like a computer science technical thing. But
I'll vibe answer
Aaron
anyway.
yeah,
It doesn't
we'll
matter.
vibe
I will have an answer.
So there's this Grover's algorithm, which is for like finding a needle in a haystack. So you have some like very large bit space, and you want to find the one that is some answer to some black box question, right? The question is yes or no, and there's like 256 bits of possible answers or something. So if you want to do this on a classical computer, the best you can do is basically just trial and error.
Just guess.
You
force it.
apply this function to every single possible answer, and you find the one time that it pops up is true instead of false. Okay, you found the answer. So the estimate of the number of times you have to call this function f on a classical computer is basically n over 2, n being the like number of possible trials that you have to do. Right. I'm going to give you a multiple choice question.
Okay.
For what is the number of times you have to call the quantum version of this function in order to get Grover's algorithm to, give you the answer. So there's
sorry, it was n over 2 for the classical.
Yes, n over 2.
Okay.
So it's n over 2, and I'm going to use big O notation. There's constants here, but don't worry about it. So is it O n? It's the same as a classical computer. That's one possible answer. It's O log of n, right? There, as in, if it's 2 to the 256 possible things that you have to try, you only have to call f 256 times. Okay. Do the logarithm. It's O1, which is
call it once.
you just call it once. And it just like you call the function once and it magically gives you the answer. Or is it O square root of n?
Okay.
What are your guesses?
You have your answer?
Yeah.
Well, but you probably know the answer.
I know
guess.
it for multiple reasons.
I feel like
Okay.
it's either log or square root.
Why?
Because I feel like there's got to be like an equation going on. Like there's got to be some curve.
And or like
This is
maybe what I should say
elliptic
is like given the like standard things that people believe about quantum, what do you think most people answer? Maybe that's a better way to answer.
You ask it once.
You ask a
And it
class
knows.
of undergraduate computer scientists. What do they say?
You
when
ask it once and it knows.
O1
That's what I would think
is what most people
would
say. Yeah.
say.
What was your answer?
My answer or what undergrads think?
Undergrads answer?
Probably O of 1.
Yeah. But what do you think?
What's your answer?
Square root of n.
And
Okay,
that's
so
because why?
The reason that I know why is because I know that Grover's algorithm does not break hashing.
Yeah.
And log n or O of 1 would both break hashing.
So log is
And
better
that
than
it's better
square
than a
root.
classical
Yeah, okay, that
and that
makes
it's better
sense.
than a classical computer.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and you did it by process of elimination. That is the correct answer, O square root of n. Now what this means is that if you have 2 to the 256, you have to call f 2 to the 128 times.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that's still a huge number.
That's pretty
of-
bad.
Yeah.
That's pretty
bad.
Yeah.
Like, that's still a massive number of queries to this.
Right.
It's not that much better, right? Like, but if you poll a bunch of computer scientists, they almost all say O1.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 70% of people say O1 because they think, oh, the quantum computer just splits
Simulates
into
all
parallel,
possible
Yeah,
all
yeah, yeah.
possible answers, and
It's
it
just
collapses down to the one world.
Yeah.
And like what it's actually doing is like blah blah blah, like moving along some like hypersphere surface thing. Like what you're getting is tunneling. So to give you an intuition for why it's square root of n or something like this, it's like on a classical computer, it's like if you had like a city or something, you're only allowed to move along like normal blocks. You know, you can only go from 0 to 1 or 1 to 0.
You have to go along the streets.
You have to go along the streets.
Yeah. Yep.
Exactly.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yes.
But if you're able to like tunnel from 0 to 1, you can go along the diagonal.
So
which
it can
gives
tell
you
you.
square
So
root.
by having 0, you can also have some information about 1.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That's basically it.
Kind of,
like,
you know,
I mean,
whatever.
this is like
Oversimplification.
Stoner Bro hit.
That's
hit the
fine. We're at
bomb,
that point in the
like-
episode.
Yep.
That's,
Anyways, I'm sorry. So your questions.
Well, my question was, okay, you know, like if the UFOs can travel really fast and they
Yeah.
can blip in and out of existence,
Yeah.
do you think that they know something about quantum? Like, is quantum helping them? Is something about nuclear physics helping them, or is it like a secret
They
third
definitely
thing?
have some physics that we don't have. If they can cross
Right.
intergalactic distances and they can wink in and out,
Right.
like they know something we don't.
Well,
Yeah,
of
that's
course.
definitely
Of course.
okay. Though in general relativity, there's a lot of stuff you can do in general relativity. It's pretty crazy. Like
Well,
a
we
lot of
have the really fast planes and stuff. We split the atom.
a lot of people,
We did a lot.
That's
is what I'm
baby
saying.
stuff. That's
Okay,
baby
you're saying
stuff.
we can do even more
Yeah.
with general relativity.
Yeah, like a lot of people, you know, there's like wormholes and stuff in like where you can kind of go tunnel through space and
Okay.
time to like get to some other
Maybe the
spot.
nukes make the wormhole.
In 4 dimensions it seems like they're popping in and out. Or sorry, in 3 dimensions it seems like they're popping in and out, but they're just like going into the 4th dimension, if you
Right.
will.
Okay.
Right.
And that's unrelated to quantum or nuclear. That's
Yeah,
just
that's
sort of
just like
standard.
Standard general relativity, like Einstein's theory, like is
Okay.
kind of okay.
Do you
with some
think that's
things
what
like
the
that.
UFOs are doing?
Maybe, yeah, I don't know. I've no clue what they're doing. I have no insight into what they're doing. But
But
another
they
really
all come to nuclear. I think it's. I mean, sorry, Matt and I have had
Yeah.
a lot of off-camera discussions about this, where the UFOs show up at nuclear sites. Like, why are they coming to the nuclear sites? Like, is that because they're interested in the nukes, or is it because like the nukes do something that like activate some sort of wormhole situation they come through? This is what I'm trying. This is what I'm working
I have
on.
a theory.
What's
for
your
this.
theory?
Yeah,
Well,
what's
my
your
theory is that the UFOs are all made up, and making up a story about the UFOs appearing near the nuclear sites is a better story. Is a good story. It's like, oh, the nuclear sites. Yeah.
Boo.
Boo.
Head in the sand.
But one thing that's kind of interesting in a lot of UFO encounters, they experience time dilation, where it's like, oh, you know, like I was walking along the road and then, you know,
it felt like hours, but it was actually minutes, or the opposite.
Mostly it's the opposite.
Oh,
it's
it felt like minutes and it was hours, or it
I
was-
was
it
there
was
for
2
15 minutes and then I checked my watch and it was 2 hours later. You know, or whatever.
Okay, yeah.
In general relativity, you know, the rate of time is variable. It can go up and down, right? Like time can speed up and slow down. And you know, like there are these things called like Alcubierre drives or whatever in general relativity that like allow you to travel like faster than the speed of light and stuff like this. And it might look like popping in and out of existence, but there would be like a bubble around it.
They're like stretching space.
They're stretching
around.
space and
then
time
that's why you
around
get the
them.
time dilation effect when you see them.
And there's like this big
You're
like
close.
tidal wave of space and time
Yeah.
that like creates a high space and time are like compressed or like spread out or something like that. Like you don't necessarily need, I mean, the exotic physics that you need for that is materials. You need stuff with like, you know, negative energies or like imaginary energies.
Okay, so we're
or
getting
whatever.
distracted by all this quantum stuff. We need to go back to general relativity.
Well, I think it's that we need to understand the relationship between general relativity and quantum mechanics in order to figure out these materials that allow you to
Yeah.
warp space and time in some crazy way. You know, like, and that isn't to say that like general relativity is just correct. But one thing that's kind of interesting about general relativity is that it's like, it's super general. It's like, it's kind of the least constrained theory that could possibly explain space and time in 4 dimensions. There's actually this like amazing graph that like shows like as a function of dimensions of time and space, like, are you able to have like stability in that world, right? You know, like if we had a 5th dimension or something like this, you know, would we live in a stable world? And then like, and the answer is like this weird like 3+1, like 3 spatial, 1 time is like this weird island of stability where like everything works out in the way that it works for us. And like, you know, and so then like the string theory people will be like, oh, but they're like just curled up, they're compactified dimension, blah, blah, blah. You know, like they have all this cope to try to explain that it's not 3+1. And I'm not saying that that's not true, but general relativity is this like extremely unconstrained theory that like you can put a lot of stuff into it. It's like not even possible for it to be wrong in some sense. You know,
That's the best kind of theory.
yeah, exactly.
They love theories like that.
And like I might even say that like general relativity to me is more like fundamental in some sense than quantum mechanics. You know, like
Yeah.
like as in like even if it is this like emergent thing that comes from like qubits or whatever, I don't know. But like I don't know, I'm getting very far away from your question. But,
No one wants to answer the UFO questions.
I mean, there's I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of stuff in our existing physics. We've figured some things out.
Yeah, like they just might have, they don't even necessarily need new physics. They might just have really good physics of what we have.
Or like just it's like new materials
Yeah.
that we don't understand.
They have quantum computers.
Or they have quantum computers and they can, you know, just you know, whatever.
Yeah, it's like I'm like, do they have fission? Do they have quantum computer? Like, what's the thing that they have that we don't have?
I
makes
also
them so
think that
technologically advanced.
this relationship between nuclear physics and gravity is like I mean, okay, if you want to get weird, there was this conference in the 1950s and it had everybody. It had like Oppenheimer, Feynman, you know, John Wheeler, like all the super famous physicists.
Carl Sagan, was he around then?
Maybe.
No, he's later, right?
Yeah.
He's later.
But,
Yeah, he wasn't there.
but it was like 1955. They all got together to like discuss quantum gravity.
Mm-hmm.
And there was like this very hot area of research right up until like 1955. And then, you know, nuclear
Crickets.
secrecy act passes, total
Mhm.
crickets from there on out. Like we don't get like any good theories about the relationship between quantum mechanics and nuclear physics.
The interesting findings go to the breakaway civilization. They go underground. They're not going into the blog posts that are
Or
being
it-
read by the VCs on Twitter.
Exactly.
I will say that. That's sort of actually my main summary, I think, of this whole thing.
Yeah.
All right,
Any
shall
other
we?
questions? Yeah,
Nope,
I know.
that's
This was
it.
great.
Hard stop, 4 p.m.
No,
Gotta
thank-
go.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. This was great.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, this was an
thank you
awesome
for
I
having
feel
me.
like this is good. You know, people got a little overview of whatever. They got some FUD. They got some counter FUD.
Yeah, I think
you know?
we went through sort of like the whole emotional spectrum of like, wow, this is super interesting and cool to like, oh, this is fake and gay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what we can provide for the people. So yeah, hope that this helped, I guess.
Yeah, I hope this
Or
helps.
whatever, you know.
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, it's like we don't know anything. And my gut says that this quantum computing stuff will take a lot longer than people think it will. They are making progress that's interesting and exciting, but like it is so overhyped in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. Like just to finish on the criticism, it's like getting the gates to cohere and not have horrible errors all the time. And when you scale it up to like all of the qubits are all entangled with each other in this like crazy like blender of entanglement, like it's a very hard problem. And it seems to me that it's fundamental. We're not even at the level of understanding the fundamentals, let alone like anybody who's telling you it's just an engineering problem, it's just an engineering problem.
We just got to throw more money and
Just
more
throw more
computational
money
resources
and
at
we'll
it.
solve it. It's like kind of overselling it. And anybody who tells you that this stuff is solved is also overselling it. Or excuse me, anybody who's telling you that it's impossible
is
underselling it.
Yeah.
You know,
It's in a superposition between being oversold and undersold.
That's
exactly.
right. That's the reality.
Okay.
Cool.
Well,
Cool.
thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
See you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.